Cold open question of the day, my guy, Brendon Kleen. Marc Gasol, former Grizzly, title winner with the Raptors, former Laker, Spain legend, has officially announced his retirement from professional basketball at 39. Was obviously been out of the NBA for a little bit now, but he's officially retired. What to you is your favorite or most memorable or image or something? What to you, when you think of Marc Gasol, what sticks out to you? What pops into your head?
I think a lot of people will say, and I certainly wouldn't have any problem with, the 2019 Raptors championship. That is an easy answer, Chris, but I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here to a game that I attended in 2017 when Gasol was still a Memphis Grizzly. Very personal to me. This game did not matter in NBA history whatsoever. It was a regular season game during the dog days of the Suns being awful and everybody thinking Devin Booker was trash. But what happened in this game is that the Suns won it on an inbounds pass with 0.6 seconds left from the sideline over the basket, where Tyson Chandler, back when he was a Sun, if anybody even remembers that happened, alley-oop dunk as time expires, basically one of the only ways they were even going to get a shot off, and Marc Gasol was the inbound defender. Dragan Bender, former top 5 overall pick Dragan Bender, was the passer, the inbound passer. Gasol's arm stretched out, and Tyson Chandler dunking on, I believe, Tayshaun Prince's head is the face I'm seeing as I rewatch this highlight, and I'm assuming that my memory serves me correctly, and that is indeed his face. I obviously know he was a Grizzly. That's my memory of Marc Gasol, just because it was one of the first games I ever remember covering, and a rule that I didn't necessarily fully know that you could even do that, and Tyson Chandler did it. You don't have to have the ball not over the top of the hoop if it's from an inbound. So you can do the FIBA straight over basket interference stuff if it is an inbounds pass. I learned that night, and Marc Gasol, unfortunately, was not able to tip that inbounds pass, and the Grizzlies lost.
That is very fun. I love that for you. I love in-person memories for these things because seeing these guys in person is something that it's very easy to take for granted, but we shouldn't. And getting to see them just do something cool on a random night, I think, is oftentimes what speaks to their brilliance in a lot of ways. So I love your answer. I have two. One is kind of an in-person one. I covered a Cavs preseason game in Columbus one year when LeBron was back, and I drove up from where I was going to school in Southeast Ohio and walked through the tunnel. And I've never felt smaller height-wise in my life than walking by Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, y'all are huge. And that just stuck in my head. Actually, I didn't say that. It was just in my head. But Marc Gasol, big guy.
Who's your current champion of the holy shit, you're tall belt in the NBA?
Wembanyama?
Well, okay. Thank you for listing the tallest player in the NBA. I mean the guy that maybe kind of surprises you. Like the person you were kind of like, whoa, I didn't quite think I'd be cowering beneath your shadow, but here we are. Vic, you know it. That's literally the first thing on the bullet points of Victor Wembanyama.
It still just kind of caught me off guard, not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
It still just really caught me because he's just so big and weird and huge.
That's fine. If that's your answer, that's your answer. I'm not denying you your truth, but what is your other Gasol memory?
It's the Raptors title win. I mean, he was so good. Like, Kawhi is the headliner of that title team and everything that came together after getting him. They're not winning the title unless they get Marc Gasol, unless they make the in-season trade to go get him. They bring him in February for a trade. This is all it costs the Raptors to get CJ Miles to get Marc Gasol in 2019. CJ Miles, Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, and a 2024 second-round pick. He ends up becoming a starter on that team after initially coming off the bench. He helped his passing on that team was unbelievable to help juice that offense. Helps them make the finals. They win the finals. He becomes the first set of brothers, him and Pau, to both win titles. He was just so good during that last run where it clearly had just ended in Memphis. It had clearly just not gotten to the peak of that grit and grind era. McConley was gone and Zebo, and it wasn't the same thing anymore. But he goes somewhere else and he has all this juice, and his brilliance elevated that Raptors team in a way that they're just not winning the title unless they make that trade for Marc Gasol.
Absolutely. Fun memory. One of those guys that you wanted to get one, and cool that he was able to adapt and adjust and get over the hump. And we'll all just choose to ignore that final Lakers season. It just didn't happen.
No, also just like weird time in the world that happened, and the vibes were never quite right there. Also just love that he went back and played in Spain for a couple of years to end his career. Not even for a huge team, a team that he actually founded, which is just like a cool little trivia note for him, that he was the CEO of a club he founded. They get promoted at a certain point. He's finished out as a professional career. They're playing back at home on a roster right now that has a lot of guys, Brendan, that don't even have like Wikipedia pages. It's just like a club that he founded back in his home country. Like, there's something very cool about that. It's like Ike Irabagu, who played for Washington State, is on that team in the G League a little bit. You have like some random guys like Yves Pons is on that team, former Memphis Grizzly. Yves Pons is on that team. But it's just like a team he founded, and he just kind of went out his own way, which I think is also something about him, was he was kind of always his own guy. I think that he may have been the most himself in his skin player we had in the league for a long time, based on everything you'd read about him and the character and his, at times, surliness, I think, kind of being Marc Gasol.
For sure.
All right. Yeah, Lakers season never happened. All right, coming up on today's show, we've got a little bit of trade deadline slop. A certain name is back in the trade slop and being rumored for multiple first-round picks again. I can't believe we're here again. Joel Embiid leaves the game with an injury. What does it mean for his MVP? What does it say about the NBA 65-game rule? And we're going to pick our all-star teams. That's all coming up today on the Just Basketball Show. Welcome in. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, follow the Just Basketball Show, your twice-weekly NBA show on your podcast app platform of choice. 5-star reviews only. You can subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel as well. And got to tell you about our friends at Thrive Fantasy. Thrive is a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and the NFL. Sign up today with our code JustBasketball, and Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. Brendan, let's start today's show with some Houston Rockets trade slop courtesy of Kelly Iko, Shams Charania, and Sam Amick over at The Athletic. A lot you could go in there in this piece. The fact they're looking at another center, to me, I find quite weird. We could talk about that if you'd like to. But there's this line that I'm going to read. And this tells me that we are so back in NBA trade season. I'm pounding the table in excitement over this because I can't believe we're here again. Houston, quote, Houston has made an offer, including multiple first-round picks for Mikal Bridges in recent weeks, but the Nets have shown zero interest in any deal involving Bridges, who is part of Brooklyn's core moving forward. Brendan, once again, Mikal Bridges being reportedly sought after for multiple first-round picks from other teams. We're going to get this every year until he's like 95 years old at this point. I love that this is just a bit now.
So here's the thing. I'm probably going to do a TikTok on this soon because I don't think it's getting enough attention when we're talking about buyers and sellers, and it's going to be this way for a while in the NBA. You can follow us on TikTok at Just Basketball Fans, but the Nets don't have their pick, and actually the Rockets have their pick. So that's just not happening for that exact reason. The Nets would be getting worse, and then not only sending Bridges to the Rockets, but also sending their pick, which would get better, to the Rockets. That is a double whammy that the Nets would not want to touch with the 10-foot pole. So, no, I do not think that the Rockets are going to be the team to convince Joe Tsai and Sean Marks to give up potentially the player on the best contract in the entire NBA. So I think that's why Bridges is not going to be traded anywhere, because they don't want to be bad enough. In fact, I think we should be ready for maybe some buying and selling on the part of the Nets. But as far as Bridges goes, this shouldn't surprise anybody. I think I mentioned on the podcast a while back when he came up, or when the team came up, that they are doing him and they are doing their players no favors by the way that they've built this roster out. I think I teased a let's put Tyus Jones in Brooklyn trade when we were talking about our teams that should make trades, simply because everybody is having to do much more on offense than they ever should have to do. And so if I were the Nets, tell Houston to go F itself, get a point guard on this team, try to win as much as you can down the stretch, chase the play-in. Why not? You don't have your first-round pick anyway. And see what you can do over the offseason to replenish and restock your roster and make it make more sense so that you're not stuck in purgatory for another season. I'm done with the get rid of Bridges. I'm done with everything. Fire Jacques Vaughn. I think that dude's a really good coach.
Yeah.
The Nets are the problem right now, not any of their players or anything else. So no to all of this.
The other kind of interesting nugget here is the one I had mentioned before, which is just the part about them wanting to maybe trade for a center. And I don't really understand this either. I don't understand what the need for a center is in Houston when you have Alperen Sengun. What is the need for a center when you have a budding all-star center already, to me, is the question. Now, you could look at depth, and the names are sort of interesting because there's a variation of names that they're keeping tabs on based on this story. Kelly Olynyk, Clint Capella, former Rocket Clint Capella, Andre Drummond, and Robert Williams III. Conceivably, all of them could be backups, is because kind of real. Capella is, I think, a higher price-wise end of a backup, and there's also not really connecting skills among these guys either, which doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that's what's funny. If you read the paragraph in there, right, it says the Rockets are exploring the center market looking to bolster their rim protection, and then the first name listed is Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah, and it's like, that's not a rim protector. Andre Drummond is not a rim protector. Andre Drummond can eat
he is
for you, and
more than anything else he does. That's probably like what you would put on the resume first if you're his business manager, but he's not. But that's to your point, right? He's like a bottom. A bargain bin guy, and these other dudes are like have been starters. So it is
and like weird. then Robert Williams is obviously someone Udoka has a connection with, so maybe there's some of that, and that's kind of where that comes from. But he's out with injury, and if I remember correctly, he's not going to play this season due to injury. So like you're buying this for next season. And which is sort of like it's like doesn't fall in line with the rest of this piece that the Rockets and Udoka in particular wants to make a playoff push right now. Williams is, to me, actually the name, Brandon, that I actually like for this team in some ways, because I think cost-wise it's not super high, and you could, I think, find a way to play him and Sengun together at times, and I think based on his health, that's a guy it might be smart to just make him a 20-minute-a-game wrecking ball and make him like a really good bench piece for you and really manage him and kind of release him in controlled waves, right? That to me would make some sense more than these other names on this list.
He makes sense for exactly that reason, and it dates back even longer than just this article or this deadline, right? This is a team that heavily, aggressively pursued Brook Lopez, and that became kind of a meme because the Bucks had to pony up and the Rockets were so thrown off, and then they give this huge, weird, only 1 year guaranteed contract to Jock Landale from Phoenix out of nowhere as their backup. But he's actually a backup, where, again, as you said, Brook Lopez would not be. And so I'm not sure what they think the best fit next to Alperen Sengun is, but it seems to be very different than what most people would think. And you're not going to acquire a Clint Capella, even if his contract does go away soon and you can maybe have him on a more reasonable salary. He's probably overpaid for his production right now. Maybe he goes into a, Drummond, Robert Williams type of slot eventually. And these guys can become your backup. But right now, some of these names are players that would almost have to play next to Şengün because of how much you're paying them and what their kind of role would dictate in the NBA. So they seem to think that they need to play two bigs next to Şengün. You've heard Udoka say outright Alperen Şengün is not a rim protector. I think that was a quote that came out from him recently, and I might agree with that, but it's also what your team is built around. So you don't hear Michael Malone saying, yeah, Joker's not a rim protector, so our defense is kind of fucked. Like that, it doesn't really, it's just it is a strange thing, but you mentioned Ime Udoka. I just mentioned Ime Udoka. That is the part of this article that I focused on, Chris. Can we cut it out with the acting like this dude is the next John Wooden? They make it seem like he's the only guy in the Rockets organization that had ever heard of the phrase winning games. They're like, this guy arrived and he just wanted to win. It's like, well, yeah, I think they all wanted to win. They just couldn't before. I mean, he's a great coach. I think he deserves a lot of credit, but literally this line is in here. Udoka's appetite for winning is strong, hailing from the school of Greg Popovich and carrying that approach in Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and Boston. Now, I'm not trying to attack the people who wrote the article, but that's hilarious. What is the approach that's being referenced in that line? Winning games? His approach is winning? It's just hilarious. That like it's such a puff piece for this dude, as if he's the only guy who's ever won basketball games as a head coach.
Yeah, we've kind of gotten past the point where we get descriptors with some of this sometimes. Guys just kind of have reputations of what they do, and therefore that's like what they are, and I find that silly. Like, describe it.
His approach is wanting to win, so he's one of 30 coaches who could be described that way.
Yeah, I don't think like Wes Unseld Jr. is like trying to not win. I don't think the problem with the Wizards is that he doesn't want to win basketball games. You know what I mean? I don't think. Why am I blanking on his name? Steve Clifford is like, you know what? I just didn't want to win this year. That's why the Hornets are so bad. You know?
No, his was the exact opposite. Did you see that viral quote from him of he got challenged by Terry Rozier and he was like, we're not coming in here with this and that. I'm like, okay, well, then there's the other side of it where it's like, if you go too far talking about how actually, even though you're losing, you do want to win, it actually kind of digs yourself a bigger hole where it's like, well, then do it. But yeah. I just thought the Udoka thing was kind of funny. It's like, as I've argued, I think Houston needs to maybe tread a little bit carefully.
Mm-hmm.
I think skipping steps is a big risk in the NBA, and if you just get good enough very fast, that doesn't always pan out as well as it might seem the first season where you do that. You know, what steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 are for them are going to be just as important as hiring him and getting some of the stability that Van Vliet has brought and whatever else. They're going to need to build a championship contender, and I don't know if they're there yet, and I don't know if any of the things listed in this article would make them that even Mikal Bridges, frankly.
They're also like the winning thing is funny because they're 2 games under 500 and 11th in the West right now. It's not like this is a team. It's
his approach, man. He just wins.
It's not like they're 30-15 and pushing the Clippers for like the 4 seed. They're 11th. They're 10.5 games back of first place. They're 4.5 games out of the top 6 in the West. Like, this is like a fine, improved team that is not a juggernaut waiting to happen if they go get a different some more helpful role. We knew they were skipping steps based back on the summer. This is I think where you end up if you keep trying to do that. Yeah. You want to talk about? Let's talk about Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid hurts his knee late in the game against the Warriors, a game the Sixers lose. Philly now, by the way, down to 5th in the Eastern Conference, behind both Cleveland and New York at this point, and that is notable considering they had a pretty good cushion at one point, and that is kind of dissolved. And then Embiid gets hurt. He is going to have an MRI. As we're recording this, we do not know the status of that MRI or what that is revealed. And he had been hurt a few games before this, had missed some time. Brendon, there's a lot going on here that we can get into. We can talk about the 65-game rule. Hit me.
Let's clarify on the had been hurt for a few games before this, right? Because this story started in terms of national attention on Saturday, which is a game we absolutely would have talked about on Sunday when we recorded if it had not been a dud because of Joel Embiid not playing, right? That was, of course, the Denver Nuggets matchup on ABC that he wasn't on the injury report until, I believe, 15 minutes before it was the final one of the day was released, where if you're in a media room at an NBA game, they come hand you a piece of paper and it has everything that you need to know on it. All of a sudden, Embiid's name is there. He's ducking Jokic. He's doing this and that. And obviously, he's been missing games all season. He's already up against the 65-game rule you just mentioned. But that was kind of the first round of attention. Then he pushes to come back in this Warriors game. And according to Nick Nurse, has a different injury than what he had been plagued with previously. I don't know if everybody quite believes that it's some wholly different thing than he's ever had this season, but whatever, take them at their word for it. Either way, Sam Amick and others have said he was definitely pushing to return, in large part because of the noise around the Denver game, some of this awards stuff, and whatever else, and now it could be an even longer absence for him.
So where would you like to start with this? Do you want to start with the Philly impact? Do you want to start with the 65-game impact and the quotes and the debate that's going on with that? Where do you personally, Brendan, what do you find most interesting about what is going on here?
Well, this Paul Reed quote, I saw the same thing, and you have it in our notes, was goofy. Kind of just
so was the Kelly
saying,
so was the Kelly Oubre quote. Let's start with Paul Reed because I want to read this quote and I just have some notes. Paul Reed, I didn't sign up for that, the 65-game rule. I don't remember signing no paperwork. You feel me? I guess the union okayed it. Paul, that's what a union does. That is the point of you being an NBA PA. That is the point of you probably got some emails about this updating you.
That's what I was going to say.
There's a process here, my guy.
The union did okay that, but as a representative of said union or a member of said union, you get a vote. And the fact that you chose to ignore that opportunity or did not voice your problems in that span of time is it's really just you outing yourself as I don't pay much attention to what the union sends around. That's not anything but that.
The player representative for the Philadelphia 76ers is Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris, did you just is Paul off your email list? What's going on here? You don't have
disappearing in the union voting just like he disappears in games.
Wow, that should be a quote graphic for us. But it should not. But I'm sorry. You I don't understand this. This whole thing is just if this was happening, here's the thing. We also just know how this works. If this was Jokic, if this was Giannis, if this was any other guy and they got asked about this, they would be like, well, that's the rule because it would help their guy win MVP. We kind of understand that if this wasn't their teammate, they would probably have different feelings about it, and that's fine. But this is just silly. And the Oubre quote is also very silly.
Okay, so let's just talk. The Oubre quote, I feel like that's just you maybe laughing at Kelly Oubre a little bit. I get what he's saying. He's talking about taking care of his body, comparing it to a NASCAR and a car.
All correct.
Yeah. What's goofy about it?
Well, okay. Number one, the fact
Kelly
that
has a special place in my heart, so just you gotta tread carefully here.
Okay, all right, fine. There's the size part of it, which he just got right.
Yeah. 7'5", 300 pounds. 300. Kind of just called his teammate fat a little bit. It's cool.
He elevated his weight from 300 to 350 in the middle of the quote, which is very funny. And at 70 pounds above Embiid's listed weight, it's sure.
Okay,
it's
that's goofy.
We all
agreed.
That's the part that was goofy. The part he's talking about with comparing it to NASCAR is absolutely very correct and very smart, but that's also just at the core of the debate for the last 5 years of anything about games played. This is just hitting on the crux of it. It's how you end up with the 65-game rule because yes, does he need to maintain himself and keep himself healthy? Absolutely. I am all for that. I think most people are understanding that the demands we put on professional athletes is really high. And Embiid obviously has a deep injury history and if anyone should be careful, it's probably him. The other part of it, it's just like but you have this push against, this is a business where you need these guys to play, and then you get the reporting about come through this as well, where it's like Embiid didn't want to be viewed a certain way for not playing in games. So it's like have we? It doesn't feel like we've actually, like, we feel like we're almost like regressing this conversation in some ways about the 65 game rule, and that's dumb. That's silly that we've ended up back here.
Well, I think it can maybe bridge us to the Pacers game on the same night, also Tuesday night, where they handled it a little bit differently. But I think big picture, no matter which instance you're looking at or which player you're looking at or anything else, are you a fan of the artist DJ Khaled, Chris?
Fan is probably a strong word.
Okay. I think the reason I ask is that he popularized a phrase that I think really describes what the NBA is dealing with right now, which is that they're playing themselves, right? They wanted to move on from this mattering, from this being the dominant talking point about the league during the regular season every single year, right? And they made this rule in an effort to get there. But now it's just the same version, a different version of the same conversation, right? And it just sort of, I think, opens the door. It's just another little pathway or walkway toward what we all know needs to happen here, which is that they need to shorten the season. They can punish people into oblivion and make guys play freaking, with a cane or some sort of one of those little carts when you tear your ACL or whatever, and they can have guys out there trying to dribble with the cart, or they can just say the games total are going to be less, and that is how all of this will be fixed, because that's the fix. And they know that. We know that. Everybody aware of everything going on with this league knows that. But we all just have to kind of dance around it once a year during the regular season because it's a bunch of people who don't want to say goodbye to their money. I think it's just like you hate to make every conversation about that, but this one is about that.
100%. And just basketball-wise, Philly is, if this is like a serious injury for Embiid and he's going to miss some time, obviously he'll just won't be eligible for MVP. But standings-wise, could get really interesting for them as we kind of track where the East playoffs are going to go. Big opportunity for Cleveland and New York to kind of solidify themselves and maybe sneak into like the 3 seed for one of them and maybe get like Indiana in round 1 or something. But we'll see. There's obviously still a lot of basketball to go, even if we are well past the halfway or a little bit past the halfway mark.
I did want to say something about the Pacers, though, on the note of that game, real quick. I thought the way that they handled Haliburton's injury, I guess, didn't end up mattering because the other guys who have played really well in the few games he's been out made a run anyway. But you just saw at the beginning of that third quarter how much he makes an impact. And if he is able to come in for the last 4 or 5 minutes of that game, I think you have to wonder if they could have gotten the job done. Hopefully it's just kind of a 1 or 2 game thing and whatever. You don't want him to have to keep re-aggravating that injury. I understand that. But it's always weird when teams pick that middle ground where it's like, is he healthy enough to play or is he not? Really, what's the point of playing 22 minutes?
Cardio. Awards recognition.
Well, yeah.
That's it.
Sure.
That's it. All NBA. Like, that's it.
I guess so. And look, I do think time is of the essence with him and Siakam figuring it out, but just a weird one. The last thing, and this is a tinier note, but I want to shout out Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we often laugh when guys are demoted or we like to talk about how trades don't work and all that stuff. And this is a great example to me, Chris, of he goes to the bench when the Siakam trade gets done. He was benched before that, really, for Jalen Smith and some other things. And rather than sulk and whatever, yes, it's a contract year for him. I don't really care. Still deserves credit for it. he not only has embraced the role and continued to play hard and everything else, but I feel like he's actually really changed his game, and he's cutting, he's hitting the offensive glass, he is attacking the basket, he is doing the things that I think anyone who ever watched Obi Toppin dating back to Dayton thought his ultimate destiny in the NBA was, but because of his sporadic minutes in New York and kind of always feeling like he needed to prove himself, and then now this run and gun Pacers team that has so little structure that I think it can be hard for guys to figure out what they're even supposed to be doing. Now he's here and he's playing like a big man. He's playing like an athletic freak, and I think this is really getting the best from him. So I think, only 5 of 11 from the field yesterday, minus 10 in the box score. So what? I think if you've been watching them the past few games, you would notice that he looks a lot different, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for not just chucking threes and doing whatever he wants, but trying to figure out what's going to be best for them and for his future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've seen some speculation, heard some that this is someone that maybe they could move and try to move off of in some kind of trade at this deadline because they went and got Siakam. I don't think I would do that if I were them. I like what he's giving them. He's having overall a really good year. Career high in minutes, career best field goal percentage, career best shooting on 2-pointers. He's at 70% on twos. It's pretty darn good from Obi Toppin. Double-digit scoring a game. Obviously, he's going to dip a little bit with Siakam there. He's going to get fewer minutes. We understand that. He's not going to start. But this is someone, Brendan, that I think can just be someone they work with forward. And if you want to give the Pacers credit for some things, I think the last couple years as they've rebuilt this roster and adjusted out of the Turner-Sabonis era, getting Haliburton unlocks all of this. That's move number one. None of this, I think, really works unless you get Tyrese. But they have 2 guys that have become good role players for them that were cast off from other situations. They got Aaron Nesmith from Boston, and they got Obi Toppin from New York. And getting those guys, developing them, we'll figure out the cost for them and all of that and see where this means for their cap. But in terms of actually got good basketball players and found a way to maximize them, their previous situations couldn't while they're still young, that's some really good work from that organization. I think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, we talked about it with Rob Mahoney back when he wrote the feature on Haliburton of, having a guy like that gives you the flexibility and the freedom to try different things. And not all of them are going to work, but I think a stable head coach, a star player that guys want to be around that can bring the best out of players like that, and, probably the creativity that you have to have as a small market as a front office. And that front office, but Buchanan there has always done a good job of that, even dating back to Portland. So, they're obviously everybody's kind of watching them after they make the Siakam deal and go to the NBA Cup final and all that. But I don't think they're done. I think they're going to be tinkering for a long time.
Yeah, big fan. All right, let's go to some All-Star teams, the big meat of today's show. Brendan, let's start in the Eastern Conference. Let's go geographically here. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our friends at Homage. Homage is the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use our link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. Buy yourself something nice, get yourself someone you care about something nice, all of that and more. So, All-Stars. Brendan, starting in the East, here are the starters in the East based on what we already know, and then we're going to do full rosters and who we would have had starting if we had our druthers to do the picks. Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, Haliburton, Dame are the starters in the East. LeBron, Durant, Jokic, Luka, and Shea are starters out West. So, Brendan, who would your 5 starters in the Eastern Conference have been if you had got to pick the 5?
Can I ask you a question first?
Yeah.
Based on the conversation, the 65-game stuff we were just talking about, do you think that All-Star appearances, we don't know how long the 65-game thing is going to last for awards. If you were to ask me right now, I would venture a guess that maybe it only lasts this year. I'm not positive. But could that make All-Star appearances more important over the next little bit because that's not in the way? Just a thought experiment here. I don't know what you think.
I think yes, then I also think you could see there being some agitation to get 15 All-Star spots off the bat, which I think there's already a pretty compelling case for, just to make sure you're actually covering enough guys.
And getting the right kind of proportion of the league, Guys, the fourth best player on like the third best team was an all-star in the 60s and 70s. Now it's like, we're wondering if the Celtics will even get 3, so
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was wondering, I'm like, could it be a thing that for however long this lasts, the fact of measuring the first 4 months of the season becomes a little bit more important because you don't know what's going to happen for all NBA. And I mean, we're all sort of waiting with bated breath, I think, at this point to see what the hell these all-NBA teams are going to look like and how many of the best players are actually going to be on them, even more than most seasons as a result of this. So,
this just made me think about all-NBA and think about like how long is. I think I'm going to need to give myself like a couple weeks to really like organize it in a way that makes sense in my head. I'm already kind of stressed out about it, not going to lie.
Well,
I don't like obviously I don't have a vote. I don't.
Well, yeah.
Okay, do you want to start with? Yeah, we don't know.
You said the East first, right? You said the East first.
Well,
I just was
let's
saying
start with the West.
Okay,
The West
is where I think there's the most. How am I ever even going to pick this type of feeling? But I had the same starters as the fans had outside of LeBron James.
Okay.
So my West starters, I had 4 guys who I think you have to have as locks, which were the other 4 that the fans and everyone voted on: Shea, Jokic, Luka, Kawhi. I think those are 3 of the best players on the top teams, plus Luka, who production-wise I just think has been too great this year to ignore. His 3 ball is finally going down. He is playing a little bit more in the rhythm that we've all wanted to see from him, and he has to be there. My other starter in place of LeBron, Chris, was Kevin Durant. Mm-hmm. So that's my 5.
I have close to the same 5. That the only difference, I have SGA, I have Luka, I have Kawhi, and I have Jokic. I do have LeBron. Call me LeBron stan. I deserve it. I've seen a lot of arguments that
LeBron, I wasn't even positive I was going to put him on the team.
Yeah, I just putting him as a starter for like the sake of history. That's really like half the argument. I think like actually basketball wise, I think if it's not him, it should be Durant. Like you get after, particularly in the front court in the West. Once you get past like a couple guys, it gets really dicey.
Ooh,
I just want. He was so good to start the year. I just want him in. It's LeBron. I understand it's like kind of an emotional pick. That's the most like emotional thing I will do on the show. I just want to put him in as a starter. But if you told me that like Durant should be, don't hate it. If you told me that Anthony Davis should be the Lakers starting, I don't hate that either. But I think the ones that are locks, I agree. SGA, Luka, and Jokic, I think kind of have to be. And then Kawhi has been like just unbelievable and uberly efficient. So I had him in there as well as a pretty clear lock.
We gave Kawhi a lot of love in the last episode. So I think, his scoring is one thing that's never, he's not one of these guys like so many other stars in the NBA right now who are scoring 28, 30, 32 points per game. But he's so efficient. His defense is very, very good. And they are a team that is so good that I think they have to be represented. But LeBron in January,
not good.
You could make the case below average. His true shooting is about average, 24, 8, and 9. So obviously the counting stats will always be there, but 49% from the field, and the Lakers have just been a kind of a disaster. He had 10 more turnovers in similar minutes than he did in December. Like, I just, I get you. Obviously, he's in the starter group no matter what. I believe he's going to be a captain if they do this draft thing again, and I have him on my team. I did end up putting him in, similar for legacy reasons, kind of like you said, and who I want to be there, and who's going to be the most entertaining people to have on the court in that game. So I can't argue too much. I did end up going with him, but Starting wise, you're being a homer. That's all right, though.
That's fine.
Okay. So the way that the reserves work is 2 guards, 3 bigs, 2 wild cards, right? So
Yes.
Give me your guards.
I have Anthony Edwards, and Devin Booker. This was not hard for me. Those were the 2 guys
Interesting.
out there. I think both those guys have just been absolutely awesome. I think both of them have been just elite. I think at the guard, I think there's a couple other guards you have to look at. I think there's a couple other ways you could approach this and give some guys recognition, but I went with Edwards and Booker.
Okay, so I went with Anthony Edwards as well, and honestly, his case is a pretty interesting one because of the pure kind of efficiency stats and everything. But there's a few instances across all of these teams we're going to talk about where I don't want to say degree of difficulty, but kind of like night-to-night pressure I use to kind of win out over guys who might have better numbers and whatever, because Ant is a little down in 2-point shooting. His turnovers are still pretty high. He's only 46% from the field because of that decrease in 2-point efficiency, and he takes a lot of threes and everything else. But there's a lot of nights where he's the only consistent shot creator on that team. So
Yeah.
I have a hard time taking him off as a result of that.
And there's I think he, of the Wolves guys, and to me this is a slight spoiler, he's the only Wolf I have on my All-Star team. I felt like I had to get one on there, considering even though they've been a little shaky of late. I'm not sure how much I buy them as as good as their record says they are, unless they make some kind of trade to get another ball handler. I do just think you kind of got to get one of them on the team, and I think it has to be him.
I actually really wanted to put Cat on there, but you really look at his numbers, and he's having a very good season, but probably not all-star caliber considering how good the West is, like we talked about. So, okay, Ant, we both have. I had Curry.
Yeah.
Because I just think we overlook him a little bit at times, and this is a great season to overlook him. Don't get me wrong. They are a disaster right now, but he is, again, over 11, almost 12 3-point attempts per game, 41%. His assists are a little down. Who could fault him? He's playing with a bunch of children and hobbled veterans. But still, 28 points per game, 34 minutes per game, and the advanced stats show that offensively there are still not many players in the entire league more impactful than him. By the count of estimated plus-minus, offensively, there are like 7 or 8 players better than him, more impactful than him on a night-to-night basis. So, to me, he still kind of deserves being here. I will also not have another Warrior, Chris, but who are your bigs? Well, actually, no. Hold on. Make the case for Booker, actually, because I didn't have him.
As an all-star at all?
Well, we'll get there.
Okay. Because I have Curry is still on my team, to be clear. Like, I still have him. So, Booker, 36 minutes a game. He's averaging career best numbers from the field. He's shooting 38% from 3. He is often the lead creator on the Suns team. He's averaging 7.3 assists a game on the same turnovers he was a year ago. I think he's just been absolutely awesome. I think he's just been absolutely everything. Certainly some stretches where he's dipped a little bit below where I think his ceiling can be. But he's had a great run as of late, I think, in particular. He's been really efficient. He's been really good as a creator and as kind of the point guard on this team at sometimes in this breadth, and been a big reason. Maybe I think Durant's got to be the number one reason as to why you're carrying some of this and why they're 6 in the West despite everything kind of going wrong to start the year. But I think Booker is vital in his own really important way, and I think what he's done, the efficiency, the body of work, I think I had to put him in there.
So I think this might be a place where my proximity to watching him night to night and maybe comparing him to his own standard can get in the way. If he makes the team, which I'm not positive he will based on the fan votes. Not that that matters, but if that can be used as kind of a stand-in for his perception this season, maybe he was really, really low for I don't quite know the reason. And this is a guy who quietly, like, he didn't make the All-Star team last year, mostly because of health, but I don't know what his perception is around the league. I don't know if he's thought of as, oh, I got to have Devin Booker in there. I don't know if he comes to mind for media, for coaches, for obviously fans seemingly know in the same way that a Curry or some of these other guys do. So I think that could work against him. If he makes the team, it'll be because of what he's done in January and especially the past couple of weeks, the insane point totals, doing it on the road, having some big wins over Western Conference opponents like New Orleans and Dallas. Within that, the win streak that they piled up, the fact that the team is starting to win games. But yeah, we'll get to if he's on my team, but I don't know. I don't know in the real world what his fate will be here. And it feels like we could be headed toward a situation where all the way through his prime, he just has fewer All-Star and All-NBA appearances than you would guess based on the gaudy stats and, hopefully some more postseason success along the way. It's a weird career he's kind of putting together if he were not to get in this year.
I agree. All right, for me, the three front court players, it's Durant, it's Domantas Sabonis, and it's Anthony Davis. The Anthony Davis thing, along with the LeBron thing, Brendan, I think the fact that the Lakers are going to have two All-Stars speaks to just how underwhelming the rest of that team has been.
Yeah.
I think the fact they have two guys having great season just speaks to, and they're having two guys having really good seasons, and it feels like they're being wasted to some degree. And that I think the All-Star game stuff reflects that. But I think AD in particular on defense has just been an absolute monster. Sabonis has been a fulcrum for the Kings, having a really good year, and Durant is Durant. He's I think pound for pound been the best guy in the Sun. So I have Durant on my team here in the front court. Who are your three front court guys?
I love this. We have a lot of differences. So I have AD and LeBron. So we're tracking there. Agreed. I think Anthony Davis, it's funny because, talk about estimated plus minus. If you look at him impactfully, he is one of the more balanced in terms of 85th percentile or better in terms of offensive and defensive impact. That's really rare. He's only missed 3 games. You basically compare where there was a stretch of last season when AD kind of, before the trade saved the Lakers season, AD in January of last season actually saved their year. And pretty much what he did after he got healthy last season, when we were all falling all over ourselves to praise the guy and talking about him as could he actually make a run at MVP and all this stuff, he basically did that again at the beginning of this season. And I think if you were to not put him on an all-star team, it would be pretty insane if you just sort of break it down that way. But the one we have different, Paul George. I have Paul George in here.
Okay, make the case for Paul George, because this may have just been because when I was finalizing my list, I just watched I wasn't able to go in person, but I rewatched back the Cavs-Clippers game. And it was one of these games this year where I've seen him, and I just was kind of like, I was a little underwhelmed to some degree. I understand like the numbers are pretty good, and I understand he's had some really good games, but make the Paul George case to me.
Just another guy, we talk about it. I think I have a few dudes who are underrated, who I maybe champion because of that to a degree. Like, we do it with Gobert or Chris Middleton or whatever, but Paul George is another one
Chris
for
Middleton.
me. My MVP, who looked pretty good the other night for them when who did they beat?
You can't even tell me.
Nuggets? Was that the game that I'm thinking of? Okay. Paul George, 8 threes a game, 41%, 51% from 2, which, if you're counting at home, is equivalent to a 60.4 true shooting percentage. His turnovers have fallen off of a cliff. He's not having to handle the ball as much, so you maybe don't give him a huge amount of credit for that. But in terms of the Clippers, who I think I'm getting close to calling maybe a co-favorite in the West, depending on how they're able to stack up to some of these other West teams the more that they play them. But he is having one of his best on-off differential seasons of his career. When he has been on the court for them, they have been unstoppable. And the steadiness that he gives you, I just think is way underlooked, way underrated, overlooked, because he can come off a screen and knock down an open shot. He can run a pick and roll. He can knock down a spot-up three. If he has an inch of space, you feel great that it's going in. He's strong. He's huge defensively as they've gotten Harden and Man has developed. Zubats has gotten better. The 2-star wings haven't had to do as much, so I think you see some bigger defensive flashes. The only hole I think you could pick in it is he, again, like Kawhi, is not filling it up from a scoring standpoint, only 23 per game, and he's not getting to the free throw line quite as much, again, because the ball's not in his hand quite as much. But in terms of excelling in your role and doing it at the highest level of winning, I'm not sure many guys have been above PG this season. So that would be my case.
It's a good case. I don't think you're totally wrong. I'm just maybe I'm just being so who's your you had AD, you have Paul George. Who's your third front court guy?
LeBron, like we talked about.
LeBron.
So
Okay.
I still did have LeBron.
Now I'm sleeping on LeBron. Now I've just forgotten that LeBron exists apparently.
Yeah, so the two Lakers guys and Paul George. And then I can get us kicked off with the wild cards.
Yeah, please do.
And I think we might disagree on both here. I'm not sure. My first one was De'Aaron Fox. Did you have De'Aaron Fox?
I have De'Aaron Fox.
Okay, so we will not disagree there. I think he's been in a little bit of a weird slump lately that's hard to explain, and maybe that recent history will dissuade some voters from putting him on there. And the fact that Sabonis has been reeling off triple-doubles like it's nothing, and maybe there's this idea that only one of them can make it. But I think their roster is just as top-heavy a lot of nights as like the Lakers is, so I don't have a problem with both. I don't have Sabonis, but okay. I could easily see him making it. But in terms of Fox, look, I think what he's done to develop as a three-point shooter in and of itself is enough to keep him on this team to me. So he's not drawing as many fouls. He's finishing a little worse at the rim after a historic 77% at the rim last season, but still elite from mid-range, elite from floater range, and solid enough playmaker. And to me, he's just the engine of who they are and what they are, more than Sabonis, more than a lot of guys are, frankly, that you could consider in his place now that we're at the wild card point where it's sort of a whatever you want, whatever you value. I just think without him, their team really falls apart. And the fact that he now has added this three-point shot from pull-up, spot-up, dropping on a dime and taking them at a full sprint sometimes in transition has just made him a complete handful night to night, and he's still a great fourth quarter scorer, all the stuff that we've known him for. So that was why I gave him the lift over. I mean, you could throw me a dozen names, and I probably wouldn't have you.
I have a list of snubs we'll get to at the end after we finish this of guys that we don't talk about that I think you can make like an interesting case for a lot of them. So we can dive into that. But who's your last wild card?
Well, I want you to give me your first one. Oh, you had Fox, right?
I have Fox. The other one's Steph Curry.
Okay, so we've gotten to all of yours.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready for?
Can I guess?
You can guess.
Are you gonna say Alperen Sengun?
You know me so well. Yes, I'm gonna say Alperen Sengun.
I fucking knew it.
I love that.
Fucking knew it.
I was trying so hard earlier when we were talking about the Rocket section to not tease it. I was going to do the whole, I think this might come up later podcasting thing, and I was like, no. I want it to be purely a surprise.
I knew. So I don't know what, the other day, I can't remember if this was like a tweet or in a text in one of our text groups, that you were just like, I think it was our group text with Chris Longo and Colby Olson, who do some business stuff for us, and Colby does TikTok videos with me on for some Thrive Fantasy, daily fantasy stuff. And I just kept it in the back of my mind. You kind of like laid a little Sengun like Easter egg, and I just was then you didn't go Sabonis, and I'm like, okay, Brennan's gonna pick a center. I feel like for some, and I don't know what other centers you want to pick. I knew you're gonna go with Sengun, who has been really good. I am not quite there with him. He would be like 14 or 15 for me on my all-star list, but I think that's also because the West is so damn deep with guys that you could make compelling cases for.
So this is a version of the argument I made with Anthony Edwards, right? Where I'm putting value in the degree of difficulty, the level of responsibility, the fact that there are so many nights where Alperen Şengün is the only efficient offensive engine on his team. You can say great things about Fred VanVleet. You would never say he's the most efficient guard creator in the league. He's going to put up shots. He's not going to turn it over, but he's 6'1" or whatever, and he chucks up some shots. So to me, what Şengün has to do, being not only the best scorer, the only real big man on that team, but also the engine as a passer for making almost everybody on that roster better, including VanVleet, it just puts him in that stratosphere to me where he's deserving. You look at estimated plus minus, which is a stat that I think is a good check for yourself in a lot of cases. He's 33rd, but like Davis, like some of these other guys, he's positive on both ends. And that's the last part of the case to me is I joked about it with Ime Udoka just kind of, drive-by shooting at Şengün's defense on a random press conference the other day, but I think Şengün is fine. I think he is more than good enough to be a starting center in the NBA in 2024 when you see how, Jokic is able to paper over that and other teams have creative solutions as long as they build that roster right. So I just look, he has quick hands. He can do the whole hedge and recover thing. He can drop if he needs to. He's a good post defender. He's checking the boxes you would want and surviving on that end enough. So yeah, I think the Rockets have been good enough that I don't feel bad putting an all-star there from Houston. And they need him to be pretty damn good every single night, and he has been. So I want him in there.
I think it's valid. I think you can make a case for just like a laundry list of guys. Here's just some of the names, Brendan, that were on my long list before we go into the East. Rudy Gobert. This is guys we didn't talk about at all, or didn't pick, I should say. Rudy Gobert, Lauri Markkanen, Chet Holmgren, Zion, Ingram, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Victor Wembanyama. On top of, I would also add Jamal Murray to that list as well.
Jamal Murray and, out of fear of just standing another guy that I can't shut up about, if Desmond Bane hadn't gotten hurt, I would have picked him over Şengün.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of talent in the West. I'd really like Murray to make it, if I'm being honest. I kind of thought about
so damn good in some of these big games.
You know what, Brendan? I'm gonna audible on the fly here. I'm gonna, all apologies to the great city of Sacramento, I'm gonna take De'Aaron Fox off. I'm gonna put Jamal Murray on.
All right.
I decided I want to do that. Jamal Murray has been amazing in these big games, as you said. He's like a big reason like why they won in Boston, and he's just been on an absolute
against the Bucks the other night, 35 and 5, 13
God,
of 22 from the field. He's filthy.
Having a really good statistical season as well. It's just the games played thing, and but this guy won a title last year. He's really good. He's brilliant at playing with Jokic. Not every guard, even some ones that are maybe even more talented than him, could play with Jokic in the same way he does. It's a skill that he has literally leaned into and developed. So I'm gonna take off Fox. I'm gonna put on Jamal Murray. All right. So to recap, my starters: SGA, Luka, Kawhi, LeBron, Jokic. Brendan: SGA, Luka, Kawhi, Durant, and Nikola Jokic. My reserves: Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Domantas Sabonis, Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, Jamal Murray, and Brendan's: Anthony Edwards, Steph Curry, Paul George, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, De'Aaron Fox, and Alperen Şengün. All right, let's go to the East.
On to the East.
A little less fun, if I'm being honest. Brendan, my starters: Haliburton, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid.
So, okay. I think we have the same.
Okay.
We have the same. You had Brunson. So we both had Brunson over Lillard as far as what the actuals were. And got to admit, we should probably add Jalen Brunson to the list of Brendan Stan players because I think this dude is perennially underrated. I put it in Locked on Suns the other day, a couple weeks back, maybe when the Suns played the Knicks, or I was using Brunson as some kind of comparison for something. And I called him like a fringe MVP candidate. And all these Suns fans cooked the hell out of me in the comments. Like, I didn't know what I was talking about because I had like an offhand comment calling Brunson a fringe MVP contender. I don't think there's a lot of guys more singularly valuable to what their teams do, and the difference between what they are with that player and what they would be without than Brunson. He absolutely is in the class of Haliburton, maybe not quite a Giannis or an Embiid, but certainly a Tatum. So, I wish that he got. I know like Kendrick Perkins and Becky Hammon and a whole bunch of random people on sports media have tried to trash Jalen Brunson, and so he's kind of a weird topic of conversation for that reason. But I have one question about the East starters before we dig into our reserves.
Okay.
Has the NBA passed over Trae Young?
No. Trae Young. Oh, wait. Do you mean like he is now like doesn't matter as much? Like, what do you mean by that before I declare?
Yeah, I think is he sort of, there's been tons of this type of player in NBA history, right? The guard who puts up these gaudy stats and gets very much hyped up when they're young and wins maybe, but as their career rolls on, starts to get overlooked. And it's not even me like going on one side of that argument or not. It's just to not make an all-star starter when, if nothing else, we always would have associated Trae with being popular, right? He's a favorite of younger kids. He puts up stats. He's a hooper, right? And to not even have that anymore, I do have to say that surprised me. And it made me wonder, are we entering a period with DeJounte maybe on his way out and a really disappointing season where Trae is relegated to sort of a less prominent spot in like the NBA fan imagination?
I think it's possible that his peak like could end up being like the Eastern Conference Finals, and I think there's like a waiting for him to like evolve or do something more, and then it's just been very flat the last 2 years. And I think where we're kind of at with him reflects that a little bit. It doesn't feel as popular as it used to, for certain.
No. And think about that, right? If that is his peak, like that was year 3. The guy's going to be in the league for like 15 seasons, so if that were to play out that way, it'd be kind of weird. So,
yes.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't want that to be the case. I mean, he's a very, very fun player to watch, in my opinion, and he's obviously super talented, but they've tried a whole bunch of incarnations of that roster, and none of them have really worked. So I think we're maybe in for a little bit of a reset over there, and he might not factor in as much as we were used to him doing for the first few years of his career. But who are your reserve guards in the East?
Donovan Mitchell is one, and I think there's a real case for him as a starter. I think he's been unbelievable this year. Didn't feel to me watching him in person, I think similar to how you felt with Booker, who in that I was like a little too close to the sun, I think, at times with him, and like I was like, is he as overwhelming as he was last year? But he's been really good, and he's been, as much as anybody else, more than anybody else, the catalyst of what has worked for this Cavs team the last several weeks, including a nice win over the Clippers as Evan Mobley is back and Darius Garland's returning the day we're recording this. So things are looking up in Cleveland. And then Damian Lillard is my other guard.
Okay, so I ended up I'll switch it. So mine are the same. I have Lillard and I have Mitchell. I have to admit to you that Lillard ended up being a guy where I didn't have him on up until like this morning when I was like, okay, am I really going to take a guy off who is still on one of the best 3 teams in the East, and even in a down season for his standard, we know to be amazingly talented, has had some awesome fourth quarter moments, and kind of hold the disaster that has been the Milwaukee Bucks against him in a way. And I was like, okay, we all want to see Dame in the All-Star game. If I really did have a vote here and I was trying to be reasonable, I can't, in good conscience, not have him on. But 35% from 3, 50% from 2. Turnovers are fine, but assists are down also. Defense, he's definitely not helping the problems that they have over there.
How would you?
I don't think it's like an awesome case.
How would you sort him? To me, I had him third. If I were going to order them, I would go Brunson 1A, Mitchell 1B, and then Dame would be third. Is how I would organize them.
Well, so what I was going to say, and I guess I can just kind of jump the gun here, is the way that I broke it down, because I kind of treat the wild cards as like the last two in.
Mm-hmm.
I had Maxey up in the reserve guards.
Okay.
So I have Maxey kind of above Dame as well. So I would have it as Brunson and Haliburton, and then Mitchell and Maxey equivalent sort of to one another. Probably Mitchell ahead of him, obviously, but in the same group, and then Lillard rounding out the bottom of that. So, okay. But I had a different guy completely that I don't want to jump the gun again in place of Lillard, even as a wild card up until again I had that reality check.
Okay, let's go to the front court. Who are your three front court players in the East?
Okay, so Bam Adebayo, I feel like is the one we'll have in common.
Yeah, that's a stone cold lock for me. I think he's been amazing this year. I think he's leveled up to some degree this year. He is like the best part of a Heat team that is increasingly not fun to watch and not particularly good as of late. Lost 7 in a row. Our guy Wes Goldberg out here asking the question of should the Heat at least like call a meeting about offering Jimmy Butler for Donovan Mitchell? Like lots of weird stuff going on in Heatland. So that I've been
the rare both teams lose trade. Courtesy of Wes. But,
thanks a lot, Wes. Yeah, Jimmy Butler getting traded to Cleveland means he's motherfucking the Cleveland Charge and then getting back to Miami is what happens, I think.
I also just don't think he fits there, but whatever. Okay, so
no.
All right. Bam to me, he's taking more mid-range shots than ever before, even though he is never going to be a three-point shooter. He's making them at a reasonably high clip still. He is driving, at least early in the season. I haven't tracked this number, week by week or anything, but he was driving to the basket more, and he's still one of the best defensive players in the entire NBA. So, okay, no disagreement there. I have Jaylen Brown here.
Yeah, I have Jaylen Brown.
Okay, so I've disrespected Jaylen Brown in various check-ins we've had about the Boston Celtics, and is he even actually going to be an all-star? Let's maybe not get ahead of ourselves with Derek White. Let's actually make sure Jaylen's going to be in there. But he has improved his shooting over the course of the season. I think he has found some chemistry with Porzingis. He has kind of played within himself a little bit better as the season has gone along. His usages in January was down pretty substantially from the previous 2 months. And just feels more steady when you watch him, right? He's taken on some bigger defensive matchups at times for them, so I have him. The last one I think we might be different on. Porzingis?
I have Porzingis as well.
Okay.
Porzingis
I don't think is going to make the team, so this might be a you and I in an echo chamber kind of situation here, because I have not seen him on a lot of writers' lists or out talked about much. He doesn't seem like he's going to make it.
I just think he's been utterly vital to them. I think in some ways he would be my number 2. He's been healthy. He's had some health issues, which I think is certainly part of it with him. But in some ways, I think he's the number 2 candidate on Boston ahead of Jaylen Brown to me in terms of how impactful he's been and how just gosh darn good he has been as a shooter, as a spacer, filling in this role that he's doing. More consistent, I think, on the year than Jaylen Brown, so I would give him the edge there. So I had Porzingis as well.
Okay, so
wild cards in the East is where this gets, I think, could get a little wonky. You have one name I've already said, and that's Tyrese Maxey. I have a name that you already said. That's Tyrese Maxey. I think he has to be on here. I don't think there's a question about it. I think he has been just an absolute dynamo, an absolute breakout, one of the breakout players of the NBA this year in a lot of ways. Has to be
26 points a game, 45% shooting from the field.
Killer.
The crazy thing to look at with him is this number is actually I know we're trying to speed through the end here. It's worth talking about. When Embiid has been Maxey on, Embiid off, which is a lot of the time like the end of the first quarter, the beginning of the fourth quarter, beginning of the second quarter, whatever. The offensive rating for the Sixers in those minutes, so the potential MVP of the league off the court, Maxey on, 130 offensive rating. He has just blitzed teams when he is by himself out there. Okay, so that's my Maxey point.
One of the most fun players in the league. The pace he plays at, and also this is similar to my Murray argument, Brendan. it's not easy to play with bigs if you're a guard at times. Like, it just isn't. And his ability to play with Embiid and form a really like active partnership with Embiid, I think, has been just highly, highly, highly impressive. He's obviously grown up into that and didn't have to get thrown into the deep end because James Harden was around. But post Harden, one of the questions you could have asked about Philly is, can Maxey step up and do this? He absolutely has. He's delivered in that role 100%. So, end of the East is to me like I could have a different answer tomorrow. I think you could.
So we have had every single guy the same up to now, because we both had Porzingis, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I got Porzingis pilled by doing the prep for the show.
He's 14th in estimated plus minus total this year. Just if anyone's thinking
good.
We're crazy and this YouTube clip goes, any sort of around, then that.
Bill Simmons' dad, if you see this, say hello.
One more thing in there. He has missed a bunch of games. We have to say that. He's missed 14 games. But if you like Jamal Murray, then, I guess you can't really discriminate here.
No, and this Boston is so good that if the Atlanta Hawks of several years ago can get like a bunch of not random, but like if Kyle Korver can make an all-star team, I think we can get Porzingis into
slightly different eras in terms of talent, but I hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
Who's your last wild card in the East then?
Can I tell you who it's not first? And I want to see if he's on, if that guy's on your list. I don't have Julius Randle. I
docked Randle a little bit because he's not going to play in it probably. So I was sort of like,
that's fair.
What's the point?
Yeah. I don't have Trae Young, which feels wrong, and I think he'll probably he's video game numbers. Even if we're kind of down on him, like he's clearly there in terms of production.
But remember, the coaches pick the reserves, so I kind of think he's not going to make it.
I agree. And I don't have Jared Allen. And I really wanted to find a way for Jared Allen to get on this team because he has been unfreaking believable since Evan Mobley went out. He has upticked himself. He has been outperforming some really good players, including Randall and Siakam and the guy I'm going to name, and been more efficient in a lot of ways, and he deserves a ton of credit.
Yeah.
The name I am going to throw
He's the guy I had over Lillard. He's the guy I had over Lillard.
Jared Allen?
For a moment, yeah, up until again I, had to come to Jesus about Dame time.
Let's just talk about Allen because I again might be too close to the sun on this, in that I wondered if it was too little, too late for him, in that he was kind of ho hum to start the year. The Cavs were kind of blah, and it's just one run of a season. That to me, I didn't know if it was enough. In my head, I kind of told myself the cumulative matters, and that wasn't quite enough for Jared to get in there.
And it's funny because you docked Allen kind of for that, and I docked Booker for that. So I didn't have Booker on my team. We didn't necessarily cover my disrespect to my home and community when we were talking about the West, but it's the same thing here. But yeah, I hear you, and I think that's kind of why I ultimately didn't do it. It's also like, even the best possible version of a Jared Allen season, is that really truly the same level of impact? Or if you're going to pick him over Dame, more impact than a great point guard? Probably not. So all those reasons are why I did not do it. But the past 2 months, December and January, has been above 3 assists a game, 3.5 really assists per game. His usage in January was over 20, which for a rim rolling center, which is what we think of him as being, to have a usage over 20 is really impressive, and anchored what is now a top 3 defense. So that doesn't always get factored in to all-star conversations, but look, we've had Marc Gasol and Rudy Gobert and Jaren Jackson make it over time, and Joakim Noah, guys like that. I think, Allen has a case. Didn't Allen make an all-star team already, actually, with a similar case?
Yes, the year he made it, the year it was in Cleveland. Him and Garland were both all-stars. Mobley's rookie year, the year before they got Donovan Mitchell.
Got it. So, yeah, maybe that was a little bit of a who's around to fill in type of thing, whatever, but still, definitely has a clear case. But I think I heard where you were going, and I think we have the same guy because we are now adopted stans of Central Florida.
Paolo Banchero, baby! Let's go. Look at us. All over the place in the West, Brendan. In the Eastern Conference, you and I just
Chalk.
in lockstep. It just fucking chalk. Unbelievable for us. I love this for us personally.
Well, the East is, I think, a little less clogged, so a little easier to zero in on. But look, we have similar taste.
But also to push back on that just a little bit, I do think there's enough guys where you could have talked yourself into Randall, and even though if he's not going to go, you could have talked yourself into Jared Allen. You could have said, hey, Pascal Siakam is still having like a pretty good year. You could have made it. I've seen Scotty Barnes on some very smart people's All-Star list. I couldn't quite get there.
Me too, and I wanted to put Scotty, honestly, but if you look at like they're way better with him off the court. I know like not all of this stuff matters, and actually Paolo's an example of the same thing.
Yes.
But the advanced stuff just does not like Scotty, and that team is, to me, maybe even if the records aren't crazy far apart, they are a substantially worse team than the Magic. So yeah, look, Paolo, it's like I don't always like to do it of, wow, look how much better they've gotten, because that doesn't really matter in the vacuum of one season. If I'm comparing, well, Paolo's gotten better versus Randall just being the same but being very good also, I guess that's not super fair, but Paolo has just become somebody that can, last year it was like, wow, they're asking him to do a lot. Check this kid out, to, wow, he's really doing a lot for them. You know what I mean? And he's sort of handling it now, where 5 assists a night, turnovers have gone up a bit, but not a ton. The three ball is just suddenly like solid. I still almost don't trust that, but it's there. He gets to the line a ton. The amount that he handles the ball and is a legitimate engine for a team that just doesn't have a point guard, and the dude is 21 years old and he's relatively efficient. Like it's the same as the Şengün and Anthony Edwards stuff I was saying in the West, where I'm going to give guys a little bit of a bump for being awesome with less great circumstances than I am for somebody just slotting into a role and kind of filling up the box score on a great team. So Paolo gets the lift from that, and I think Way super deserves it.
100%. Notable snubs, I think, in the East can include, and perhaps not limited to, Jimmy Butler, who I don't think has just played enough games, DeMar DeRozan, Trae Young, Siakam. Maybe you can make a case for Franz, but I think the injuries do knock him down a peg. I think that might be the extent of the snub list. It's not quite as deep of a bench.
Scotty, who we said, yeah.
And Scotty Barnes. And sorry about that. And there's not, I don't think anyone else that I would really have. Like, I don't think Mikal got there. I don't think there's anyone else on any of these other teams. Like, there's not another Nick that is in there among these good teams. There's not really anybody else. The West definitely has a deeper bench of guys with really valid cases than I think any of these teams in the East do. Like LaMelo, not even close.
No. I mean, yeah, Dante DiVincenzo made a late push, but unfortunately no room for him.
Evan Fournier is like, guys, I'm ready. It's time. All-star push.
PJ Washington with his 43 the other night. You know, he
Can someone good just trade for PJ Washington? Can someone just trade for PJ Washington? That guy is going to be awesome in the playoffs.
The other snub, Chris, is Derek White. Right? I mean,
yeah.
Reggie Miller was trying his damn hardest. I don't know if you heard how many times Reggie mentioned Derek White should be an all-star on that broadcast on Tuesday. He knows when votes are due. He was doing his work. I don't know why he owes so much allegiance to Derek White, but he's going to get talked about as a snub if he doesn't make it. So just ready yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's valid. Boston's really good. He's been unbelievable this year. I get it. Even if I couldn't quite get there, and obviously I forgot to mention him on my subs list, and he hasn't been on everyone's, I don't think. I think there's a very valid argument. I think particularly from JJ Redick and some other pretty big names in the space, I think you're going to hear some consternation if Derek White.
I think JJ actually didn't end up having him.
He didn't. I was driving home from something yesterday, and I was listening to him and Nikias and Steve Jones, some of their stuff, and Derek White didn't make his team.
Snubbed his own guy.
Snubbed his own guy. Just bald guy discrimination from JJ Redick, and for me, a bald man.
If we listen to Cerruti from our waving the flag segment with him, he was making the case for Suggs to be an all-star. I think that might have been a little aggressive, but maybe Jalen Suggs snubbed too. But no, I think we got them all. I think that's a good list.
I'll make a bald guy all-star list for our next show as well. That'll be the cold openers. Here's the 5 guys with no hair in the NBA that deserve to be all-stars, and it's just Derek
LeBron
and
count?
Jalen Suggs. Nah, you got to no. It's guys who have embraced the fact that they don't have hair. LeBron has been in denial for years.
That's true.
And he has, and despite having the money to get like a real fix for all of that. But those are our all-star teams. To recap the East starters for both of us, this is full chalk: Haliburton, Brunson, Tatum, Giannis, and Embiid. Our reserves: Mitchell, Lillard, Bam, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Paolo Banchero, and Tyrese Maxey. That is going to be it for the Just Basketball Show for Thursday, February 1st. We're in a new month, getting close to the deadline. A lot to come. Deadline next week. Give us some more Slop NBA gods. We're ready for it. But a whole lot to come between now and then, including some actual basketball games and all-star announcements. React to all of that and more here on the Just Basketball Show. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'm Chris. That's Brendan. Enjoy the hoops.